Good day to all of you, and welcome to PTV Talks. Today we have a presentation about what's new in PTV Vistro, including the upcoming HCM 7th edition. But before we get started, wanted to let you know that we will be having a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. You can enter your questions in the question box within the control panel at any time throughout the presentation, and we'll answer as many as we can during the Q&A. A recording of today's webinar will be sent to you in an email. And also, we have a couple of announcements to make. We have a host of trainings coming up in the new year. You can see on this screen, starting on January 19th, and we have training scheduled all the way through March. And in order to locate where to sign up for that, just take a look at the slide here. Go ahead and click on the resources tab up at the top, and you can see the events and trainings and resource library are places where you can both find the trainings and also past PTV talks. Next, I would like to introduce to you to today's speakers. First, we have Adam Lynch. He is working out of PTV Group's headquarters, the Senior Product Manager for Traffic Engineering globally. Think Vissim there. I'm sorry, Vistro. And also Bill Cisco here in PTV Americas, the Manager of Urban Planning, Traffic Engineering. And with that, I would like to hand it over to you, Adam.
All right, thank you, Jamie. Hopefully you can hear me just fine.
Just fine.
Good. Yep, so today's slide is right up here is the agenda for today's conversation. We're gonna roll in first with the what's new in Vistro 2022, and I'm gonna handle that part of it. And then we'll shift gears over to Bill Cisco, who will give us an overview on the HCM 7th edition and some valuable information on kind of the behind the scenes look at it. And then we'll look at Vistro's preview of the HCM 7th edition. Again, this is something that will be coming soon in January, and we'll be repeating that quite often during this presentation. So don't start looking for it as soon as we get off the call. You're gonna have to wait just a little bit longer, but Bill will answer a little bit more about that. And then at the very end, if there's any pending questions that we didn't answer in the chat, or if there's anything else, feel free to participate in our Q&A session at the end. So I'm going to begin our first part of the presentation with the what's new. It's again great to see so many of you joining our session. I think we're up to about 150 or so attendees right now, so that's pretty amazing to end a year with. And I'm very excited that you're excited to learn about our what's new and also about the HCM 7. I do want to give you a little bit of a look at some of the recent activities that we've had in our Vistro community. I think this is a good place to end the year. A lot of this is because of your efforts. And the first thing I want to highlight here is this video that's up in the top right corner. This is a presentation from Beth Ostrowski and then Adam Moser. And this was presented at the ITE spring meeting, so it's not brand new, but it's been around since the spring meeting, and it's for the Tennessee section as well as the Deep South joint meeting that they had. This is a great video that discusses benefits of Vistro, especially coming from someone else other than us. So it's always nice to see it from the other side of the fence, as well as you get to see how Vistro is being applied on real projects and not just our examples that we show you. So it's definitely something I would say try to Google for, or when we pass out these slides, maybe we can send you this link to this one. But definitely, if you have presentations that you're presenting in the industry, please let us know. And of course, we like to collect these and potentially share them as well with other customers and other agencies. So thank you again for all of your efforts with the presentations and mentions of Vistro through the past year. Also, we have our LinkedIn forum. It's still growing, so if you're not part of that forum, please join us. And that's a great place to stay in touch for the updates and different features as we release service packs throughout the years and stuff, as well as ask questions with your fellow forum members. So please look for that in LinkedIn. And then also in this bottom right corner here, we have a few new larger agencies to welcome into the Vistro family. And we hope to add more to this list as often as possible, of course. But definitely, if you have an agency in mind, or if you're working for an agency and you think Vistro is a really good fit for you, please come talk to us. Don't be bashful. We'll like to help you. And if you're a consultant, perhaps we can also help you promote Vistro to your agency or talk about Vistro with your agency. So just let us know. And then also, we're continuing our spot still in the ITE Journal. And you may have seen it throughout the year this year. Again, with this spot in the journal, we're pulling out specific Vistro use cases, and then we're matching this use case with the knowledge base articles on our knowledge base page. So just be on the lookout for those things. It's a very quick way to get some information about us. And speaking of the knowledge base page, I mean, we are increasing this with features and use cases, as well as some trainings and some self-learning spots here. And all of this is really easy to find. You can find it on, I mean, if you go to PTV Group's webpage, you can just find it right there from the search bar or from looking in the Vistro product. But I always find the easiest way to do it is just Google search. That's how I find things. And I just type in PTV Vistro knowledge base, and it's usually the top couple of results. So that's an easy way to get to Vistro learning materials. And if you remember our past PTV talks that we've had earlier in the year, we have this really good interactive demo that's in the bottom right corner for the city of Boulder. This is a great overall little video to understand the various use cases with Vistro, and also look into its functionality for import into PTV Vissim. All right, so with all the announcements out of the way, let's go into our release topic. So PTV Vistro, it's version 2022 is the latest version, and soon we'll be releasing our first service pack. I don't think it came out today. I think it might be coming out sometime pretty soon. But the main topics in this release is, again, the HCM 7th, which Bill will mostly talk about, so I'll skip this on my part and give it all to him. And another topic is we're continuously improving the Visum integration from Vistro to Visum, and we have 3 features that I'll show off to you today in that area, as well as get into the software a little bit just to see it from that side and not just from slides. And then lastly here, I'll do a quick demo of our map search functionality, which has actually got some pretty good cheers and applause at the UGM. Okay, so first, let's look at this function right here. This is the trip distribution matrix import to PTV Visum. It's now possible to export the trip generation distribution data from the Vistro tables and then import that into Visum as a matrix. And so this is something that users have been requesting, and a way to create matrices in the Vissim side from Vistro, and so this feature will deliver that. It's extremely helpful for those who want to do some dynamic assignment modeling in Vissim, as well as use Vistro to be the place to start and then have your dynamic assignment models being created automatically. So this is a really quick shortcut to get into DTA, and it also reduces a lot of the learning curve on the DTA side, because again, your matrix will be created. You'll have all of the parking lots, I mean, those detectors, but they're technically called parking lots. All of those will be created to have the ins and outs for your matrices and your matrix sums. And the nodes will automatically be created between each junction. So this is, again, a very streamlined way to start using DTA, and it's coming straight from Vistro. And it happens in a few quick steps. One, you would basically just put zones all around your traffic study, and this is these are the same zones that you would use for your trip generation. And then these represent the zones that you would have for any matrices or something like that if you did this on the Vissim side. You would put the ins and outs of your zone data. So we have my laser pointer here floating around, if you can see that. You would type in the in trips and the out trips, and that represents the ins and outs of the matrices. And then on the next step here, you would go ahead and put in your trip distribution percentages to these zones, just like you would for any other traffic impact analysis, but this time it's for your dynamic assignment. And then finally, when you import this into Vissim, you would do the A&M export process, but this time, make sure you check the dynamic assignment option. That's that little radio button in the middle there. And then make sure you also have the import routing checked. And this will export out this routing file that you'll have to put in as well on the Vissim side, so that it knows what to do with these routes. So make sure you get those two things checked, and then just do your standard export and import. And then when it comes in on the Vissim side, as you can see here, and I'll get into the software in a second, that you have the matrix and you have your network converted in there, and basically all of those zones that you had in Vistro are now turned into those parking lots, as I mentioned before. And then you have the ability to adjust the length of the matrix and kind of set it up the way you want. So you have your burn-in period and maybe a cool-down period, however you want to adjust this. And of course, I mean, again, I love showing these pictures. You get your nice out-of-the-box simulation from Vistro straight into Vissim, and you get stuff like this where all of your lanes are matching the geometries perfectly, and you have all your traffic volumes, pedestrians, and signals in the model. So real quick, let's just jump into Vissim side here, just to give you a quick look. This is that same model, but now it's not a PowerPoint slide. But if I zoom in a little bit, you can see that these are the parking lots that came in from the zones. So it says parking lot 1, and then it also says which node it came from, and that matches the node from Vistro and the same node numbers. As well as if this is the first time you're seeing it, I mean, you get your conflict areas, you get your speed decisions, you get your detector data. Let's turn the conflict areas off for a second. You get your nodes underneath that, as well as signal bars. So pretty much all of the level of detail that you need to make a Vissim model is now coming from Vistro to Vissim, including some dynamic assignment elements. So pretty cool stuff. All right, so let's go back to our presentation here. The next feature I want to show off is this improved channelization feature that we have here. With this feature, we now include the crosswalks on the channelization, so you'll get the little zebra crossing on the turn itself. And this also makes the export to Vissim more accurate, because having that crosswalk there will also show in Vissim with that crosswalk, and it will help you figure out where to put stop bars and things like that at a better location. So it just kind of cleans up a few more things on the conversion that you won't have to worry about anymore. And what this looks like on the Vistro side here is this is your typical intersection that you have with channelized turns. Again, look at how it matches the base map, and it's wonderful to see. And you get your nice metrics and things like this. You can kind of see, again, with the laser pointer, it's a little slow coming through on the feed. You can kind of see that you have your crosswalk on that channelized turn now on the Vistro side there. And again, when this comes into Vissim, it's a pretty close conversion out of the box. And the one thing I did add in this illustration is I quickly connected my crosswalk up to a walking path through this field here. This would be a proposed walking path because there wasn't one in the existing base map. That way I didn't have floating pedestrians going through the grass. But yeah, to do something like this, it's very fast again to do the export, and then you can modify it any way you want on the Vissim side. So it's definitely, again, a good place to start. Okay, and the last Vistro to Vissim improvement that I want to show is this ability to select intersections to export to Vissim. This is one of my favorites that we put out this time. This gives you the ability to say, if you have the city of Austin, which is shown on the screen here, instead of exporting the entire city of Austin to Vissim, which you may not want to do, just because it might take longer to run the models, especially if you're only focused on one intersection or a corridor. Now you can isolate that intersection or corridor and do that specific traffic model. So this gives you the ability to mix and match and get exactly what you want on the Vissim side. This also allows you to potentially, let's say, augment an existing Vissim file with new data. So you may have already an existing file in Vissim, and then you want to add a few extra intersections to that existing file. You can, of course, generate a lot of stuff in Vistro for another study and say, wait, I had those two intersections on a previous project. Let's just bring them into Vissim. So you can grab them and put them into Vissim. So there's lots of use cases for this. So this uses this analyze checkbox button to work. So, and I'll show you in a second. If this checkbox is checked, then the model will be exported. That intersection will be exported to the Vissim model. If it's unchecked, then it will not be exported to the Vissim model. So this is something, just a new concept to be aware of. And sometimes people have these checked anyway for their reports. So if you have it set up for a report, you can always save a scenario of your report settings. And that way, if you need it unchecked or checked for just for a Vissim simulation, you can just create a new scenario to use just for the Vissim simulation. So it is a way to use scenario management to keep these checks and unchecks the way you want it, so you don't have to do any rework. So that would be a good tip for this particular feature. But in this example right here is, I mean, we zoom in on the Austin model, and I want to just import 15th Street corridor. So I'm able to select all of 15th Street using the MultiChange tool, and I'll show you that in a second. And then on the Vissim side, you can go in and then just import that A&M file, and you only get 15th Street in Austin instead of all of Austin. And again, enjoy your out-of-the-box simulation of just 15th Street in Austin. Again, let's go into the software here, and I'll show you this. So I'm going to open up my Vistro, and if anyone's paying attention, I'm actually in Vistro 2023 right now. Don't get confused. I'm only in that because the HCM changes are in Vistro 2023 that you don't have, but I have it. So don't get confused. But all this other functionality I'm talking about will be in your version. Okay, so here's the city of Austin here. And over in our grid, we do have the analyzed intersection checkbox that you can check on and off manually, or what I was saying before is you can go to the MultiChange to check on and off checkboxes. So if I go to edit MultiChange, you get basically the list of all the intersections within your model here. And then you can pick the attribute, analyze intersection. And then you have the two values, true or false. So true means it's on, false means it's off. You could do this for all the intersections. So if I click false and hit apply, the note at the bottom says value analyze intersection was set to false for 87 intersections. And you can see in our table over here on the traffic control table that the analyze intersection checkbox is now unchecked because of MultiChange. And then if I go to true again, it puts it right back to set it up. So I'm going to turn everything off just so I can isolate one intersection here. And I want to isolate 15th Street at West Street. I could just look in here and check everything off and check it on, but that's no fun. What I will do is use our filter tool. All of these columns have a little funnel, and you can just click on the one for name. This is why you want to name your intersections appropriately, because it makes it easier to filter things a lot later. So if I type in 15th, all the intersections with 15th in it are now summarized for me. And if I wanted to select all of 15th Street, I could just highlight the top one and then hold down my shift button on my keyboard and then click on the bottom, and then everything could get highlighted and I could check the box. And then all of 15th Street is now isolated here, right? But again, I just want 15th at West. So I'll unselect everything in my short list of 15th Street, and then I will only check 15th Street at West, and then set this attribute value to true and hit apply. And this time the message says that only one intersection was set to true. And you can see I'm at 15th and West on my workflow list here, and the analyze intersection button checkbox, or checkbox, not button, checkbox was set to true. Now, if I zoom in at that location, I'll slow down a little bit here because I think it might take a few seconds to catch up on the feed. Yep. So if I zoom in a little bit, this is 15th Street and West on the left side. But if you look at the intersection on the right side, the neighbor, the analyze intersection checkbox is unchecked, which is exactly what I wanted based on how I set this up. Okay. And then you could go to the file, export A&M, and I'm not going to do this because I already have one prepared for you. File, export A&M, and then when you export it out, it will only export one intersection for you. Let me switch over to Vissim here, and then here is my. You don't need to see my file folder. Let me go to the files. 1 second. I have lost my filing structure. Give me one. There we go. Give me one more second. Oops, there it is. Yep, I found it. Okay, so I had too many folders open. So here's my select area, and now I have my A&M for one intersection. And if I drag this into my Vissim model, and you can drag in the A&M files, you don't have to go through the import. That's always a little fun shortcut. Now you can see that I have just the one intersection imported in from my Austin model instead of everything. And I can go ahead and hit play. Of course, I have to save it. And it only has to load up one signal controller. So that's a benefit of doing this because you get what you want. You can see that the animation is now playing and everything's good. All right, so that is that feature here. And now the last thing we want to talk about is this map search. And then this will be the segue back over to Bill after this. Well, I guess we have a poll question first, but let's quickly knock out this map search functionality here. So if you've noticed in the software, if you had Vistro 2022 open, there's this little magnifying glass that is in the upper left corner here. And if you click on it, you now have a field that says enter a search term. So this is a way to search anywhere in your network for an intersection, maybe a point of interest. If you start a new model and you start with the big maps really zoomed out, you could search for a city to help you find the place that you're looking for. And I believe most of the time it'll even find an address. I guess it depends on how you write the address. We're still kind of learning things as we go, but most of the time you could get an address in here. But for this example, since we're in Austin, I just want to search for a point of interest. So I'll search for the Texas state capital. And you can see as I'm typing, it's suggesting different things. But when I complete Texas state capital, now I get the actual point for Texas state capital. And then you would just click on that selection and you can see the little blue dot now is right on top the Texas state capital. So that is the map search functionality. Okay, so this ends my part of the presentation right now, and I'm going to turn it over to Jamie to do the first poll question, and then Bill will kind of transition in.
Excellent. Okay, so I will begin, and just to review where we're at on the agenda. So we're going to cover a little bit of the overview of the HCM 7th edition items, and then I will dig into the software and show some of the implementation, and then we'll go back for a full Q&A on the whole session. All right, with regards to HCM 7th edition, as Adam mentioned earlier, it's not yet published and released by Transportation Research Board. They are planning to release that, as the asterisk notes, during the annual meeting this January. This version of the manual will come in two variations, one being an electronic publication, I'm told, which will actually be more than just a PDF, but actual on a platform that makes it easy to use on tablets and phones and et cetera. And so that version is going to be released by TRB actually during the annual meeting. Also, if you're going to the annual meeting, please do a search for, you can search it by our subcommittee for the Highway Capacity and Quality of Service, which is code ACP 40, and you can see all the events that we have going on, including a lectern session, that will be titled Highway Capacity Manual Upgrade, What is New for the 7th edition? And that'll be on Tuesday the 11th at 10:30 a.m. And that will cover all of the new things for the 7th edition. We're going to focus in on what's new for the components that we implement in Vistro. And so we'll talk about some CAV modeling updates, a little bit on two-way stop updates. And of course, there's always errata. We're not going to focus on those during our webinar, meaning minor updates overall. So let's go ahead to the next slide. From a CAV perspective, incorporated into the 7th edition, and if you had heard the term 6.1, that was the original name for this new version of the HCM, but after all of the research that went into it and how much of an update there was to the manual, TRB decided to go ahead and give it a full version number as HCM 7th edition. So now you will be able to test and analyze the effects of connected and autonomous vehicles from a deterministic perspective, which is interesting. And you can do that within Vistro from a signalized intersections and roundabouts. There's also quite an exhaustive methodology going to the uninterrupted flow chapters as well. And then from a two-way stop control, there's some updates to flared lanes and minor lefts with one-stage movements and shared major street lane groups. So we'll talk a little bit about those, but mainly we're going to focus on the CAV analysis and how to implement that at signalized intersections and two-way stops. So before we go into the software and actually dig into how to do it, I'll spend a little bit of time on the HCM itself and how we got here. And this particular set of research that fed into these CAV analysis within HCM was derived from a FHWA pooled fund study, TPF-5371. We love acronyms and numbers, of course. In our field, you can Google, you can do an internet search on that. I use a different platform to find that for yourself, but it was quite an exhaustive research effort led by Kittleson Associates as a contractor, spearheaded by Oregon DOT as the primary state DOT as part of that, but there were other states involved as well. Something to note is that, basically all these factors that made their way into the Highway Capacity Manual, which if you remember, Highway Capacity Manual is a deterministic level of analysis. It is not simulation based. However, in order to determine the factors to implement at a deterministic level, the research derived all those factors from microsimulation, primarily using Visum, just as a little side note there, and basically back that into a level of deterministic analysis. So interesting note is this is the first time from a highway capacity perspective, as you can see on that note, well, the upper part anyway, that they're not field validated due to lack of CAV market penetration in the field. So it's really a departure for HCM. Normally everything is deterministic and derived from field data, but of course by its very nature, CAVs are not in mass, and so there's not a way to collect that data yet. So it's all derived from simulation. So, everything old is new again, and the more advanced things go back into the less advanced things, but it helps people doing this level of analysis to be able to implement that from a deterministic or HCM, or in this case, Vistro perspective. The other thing to note is that because of that, the implementation is really intersection-based market penetration. So it does not have the level of detail or presume to be able to go down to the movement level of detail on varying your market penetration based on a left turn versus a through versus a right, etc. So just keep that in mind. Little refresher course. So, go back to traffic engineering, I don't know, 102 maybe. Saturation flow adjustments, if you'll remember, in the HCM methodology. This is one of the key features. We start with HCM starts with the base saturation flow rate, 1900 passenger cars per hour per lane, and from there, adjusted down by a series of factors, all the alphabet soup here you guys are familiar with, I'm sure. You might notice some off to the right that were added in the 6th edition. But really, this is where part of the CAV adjustment factors will play into. And of course, after saturation, then based on the timing and phasing, then you get your capacity, and from there you get your delays and your queuing. And so this is really the center point of the methodology. All right, so if we look now, just so you guys can see this table that's coming in, so you'll see a proportion of CAVs in the traffic stream, and then from there, an adjustment to the base saturation flow rate. So if you do look at the 0% CAVs, it will give you the 1900, which is our base case to begin with. But as that percentage of CAVs increase, then you can see the base saturation flow rate increasing accordingly. Any number that we put in between these, of course, can be interpolated. Just as a point of reference, if you had 100% CAVs, you'll see it goes up to 2,900. So it's like about a 52% increase in saturation flow. So that's kind of the range there. Basically, the only other caveat here is that when you're applying these new sat flow adjustments, or in this case, new base saturation flow rate based on the CAVs, then this factor for lane width, it goes to 1.0 no matter what it would have been otherwise. And if you think about that, that makes sense. The lane width adjustment factor has a lot to do with driver comfort level. Narrower lanes, meaning they might not go as quickly, which means, there's not as many vehicles that can be processed. Once it moves into the CAV world, then the driver part of that comfort level starts to go out of the window and gets removed by the technology. All right, so with that, the other aspect is beyond the base saturation flow. So that all applies to this S sub 0 or S naught. After that, then we start to look at where does it apply to specific factors. And so that's where the left turns come in. Sorry, we'll start with protected, this protected factor. And again, that uses the proportion of CAVs in the stream as your input. And from there, we'll give you an adjustment factor for that analysis. And so there's some other things here, but basically there's a table for protected and a table for permitted, and the permitted varies by the opposing through rates. So that's the background for signals. Roundabout, same exact caveats in terms of its where it came from and the usability. If we think about the roundabout capacity factors, this to calculate your entry lane capacity, this first equation 33.1 is what it has typically been pre-CAVs, and then there's a new equation with adjustment factors to account for the CAVs, and basically adjustment to the parameter A for the intercept and parameter B for the slope. And from there, we get into these tables. This is our pre-CAV without CAV. That's what we were doing already as far as the factors for the parameters A and B. And then after that, then what happens is based on your entry for your proportion of CAVs in the traffic stream, and also depending if you have a single lane entry or a double lane entry, whether you have a single circulating lane or two circulating lanes, and then some other variations on that theme, then it will go ahead and pick off what your new adjustment factor would be. And of course, interpolation is allowed, and that's what we do in Vistro. From there, plug it all back into the equation and get your new entry lane capacity adjusted for the presence of CAVs. Some updates to the two-way stop. As I mentioned before, basically some modifications to minor street lefts, flared lanes, of course, just the diagram. This has been in there already, but there's some things to make it improve the accuracy of the calculations and to simplify it. And also when you have shared lane, major street, the image from the HCM shows a separate little pocket, but that's because it's a short distance or if it's a actual shared left through lane. So those updates are implemented as well. What I'm going to do now is show you how to apply those in Vistro in the time we have remaining. All right, so you may recognize this network from one of our earlier PTV Talks, and basically what we're going to focus on today are some things regarding the signal and what will be a roundabout in a future scenario. Also refresh a course on how to create scenarios and so forth. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to look at a case. Let's say we wanted to look at, well, I want to look in some year in the future. I want to look at what my results would be if I have 0% CAVs, and what if I have something that's non-zero, and how could I compare the difference, right? Vistro is just prime for all these alternative scenario comparisons. So the first thing I'll do is I'll come into here. I want to build a 2030 because I know there's no CAVs at this point that I want to study. So I'll go into my scenario manager. I'll duplicate that scenario. That'll give me scenario 4, which is a copy. I'll rename that, and I'm just going to call that 2030. 230, we're really going back in time. Okay, and then what I'm going to do to remind myself is say this is 0% CAV, hit enter. In Vistro scenario management, you always want to make sure you click it, and always want to be looking in your white box to make sure you're in the appropriate scenario. All right, from here, I will go ahead and select my first intersection. When I do that, my workflow tables start to populate. And at this point, I'm going to focus on the volume table. So in the volume table, a couple things. I just need to build up my volumes. I had a growth rate already over my existing counts, but I really need to bump that up to represent 2030. So I'm just going to quickly use MultiChange. MultiChange is your friend. It's a great feature. Growth factor, we're going to bump it up 30% to get us out into the future. And I'm going to apply, and that set all my new growth factors here. And basically, I'm just creating the case for us to be able to grow our volumes. But the second thing I need to do is actually make sure I'm analyzing using the 7th edition. So in the analysis method, I would want to go from the 6th edition to the 7th edition. Instead of doing that locally, again, MultiChange is our friend. I'm going to go to Edit, MultiChange. I'm going to go ahead and move over to Analysis Method. And from there, I'm going to change the attribute value to HCM 7th edition and apply that. And so that applied that at all of my intersections. So now I have 7th edition as my analysis method. I've grown my volumes by a factor of 1.3. And then I see this new field that's available to me using the 7th edition method, proportion of CAVs. Well, this is still my 0% CAV. And so therefore, as we look to the traffic control table where all the results start pouring in, we can see under saturation flow, it's still using the default 1900. And that's exactly what we want for this scenario. All right, well, the next thing that I'll want to do, that's built my future base case with 0% CAVs. The next thing that I'm going to want to do is go ahead and create just take a quick look at my roundabout before we leave. And we'll see that it's very similar. On the roundabout volume screen is the place for us to enter our CAV proportion. And we would see similar results of with having the 0% CAVs. So then I'll go in and duplicate this scenario real quick and press the down arrow, rename, and wipe out this. And 2030, 2030, and let's do 25% CAVs. Let's go ahead and select that and make sure that that is our active scenario. All right, now we're ready to have fun. We'll go into the signal, and I'll be here at volumes. And you could technically have a different proportion of CAVs at each intersection. It just has to be at the intersection level, but we're going to do it network wide for simplicity's sake, and for planning purposes, that's probably the most realistic thing to do anyway. So I'm going to go back, edit, and MultiChange, and I'll just pick that variable. In this case, for proportion of CAVs, so I don't have to enter it at each intersection. I'll go ahead and put in 25 and apply that. Close that out. What we'll see when that happens is then it has added my 25% proportion of CAVs in my volume screen. And then if I toggle to the traffic control table, then I can see the effects of that entry. So in this case, so if I scroll down to base saturation flow, I'll see that it has adjusted from 1900 up to 2037, which was an interpolated value between the numbers in those tables that I had shown you earlier. You don't adjust the base saturation flow rate on the left turn. Instead, it uses a factor for the left turn adjustment that's also calculated from the second set of tables that I had previously shown in the PowerPoint. And the other thing, well, I didn't mention this. I mentioned it, but I didn't show it exactly. But if we were to toggle back to our 0% CAV scenario and pick that same signal and look at the nuts and bolts here of the sat flow adjustments for the lane width, right here, the F sub W, we see we have one wide lane that gave us a 1.04. So it bumped up the saturation flow because we had, I think, 14 or 15 foot outside lane there. But again, as directed by the HCM method, once we implement CAVs that are greater than 0%, then that FW value also will go to 1.0 just as part of the adjustment. So that goes down to 1.0. So everything checks out and we get new results with our final sat flow rates that reflect the presence of 25% CAVs at our intersection. If we look over to the roundabout, then what we'll see are very similar, that our 25% proportion of CAVs is there, and that in our calculations with the A-intercept, B-intercept, and the capacity per entry lane, that these have been adjusted accordingly. So you don't see the insides of those calculations like you do on the signal sat flow, but they are calculated to reflect that 25% of the CAV. All right, in the interest of time, I'm going to toggle over here. My completed network. You think you guys get the gist. I duplicated the fifth scenario at 25% and then entered another scenario with 50% CAVs just to show you that I did it. There's the 50% there, and then we get even greater bumps to our saturation flow rate over here. Now we're at 2200 per lane instead of 1900, which went to 2037, which is now at 2200. So you see the increase in saturation flow based on the increase of CAV percentages. So, in these cases, these intersections were not operating horribly to begin with. These were level service D and level service A, but basically you may have other cases where you see more drastic results. Just as a little example here, what we can do clearly between our three different scenarios with our different CAV percentages, and we can see our sat flow adjustments and what our sat flow is going up, delays going down, capacity is going up, delays going down. So that's essentially the gist of the implementation of the CAV analysis at signals and roundabouts using the HCM 7th edition. So again, the other thing is if you're starting new networks, of course, under edit global settings, there will be there's always has been this analysis method here option, and now you'll be able to do the 7th edition. Once the service pack gets released, it'll be at least January 11th at the earliest, but probably after that slightly. And there's also a place here where you can do your proportion of CAVs globally that would affect the new network elements. Otherwise, you have an existing network like what I had here, then you'll definitely want to use the multi-change that we had gone through in this example. All right, with that.
Okay, so this question was actually it was about optimization and how to manually enter a cycle length for the optimization versus having the best cycle lengths adjusted. So there's a way to do this. I can show it locally. So if I just click one of these intersections, you are on the traffic control tab up here, and you have these optimization tools. The first one is default signalization, of course, to set everything up the way it will be set up with NEMA. And then you have the other one next to it that looks like a stopwatch, and it says optimize split and cycle time. And if you click on this is where you can just type in the two bounds being basically the same number. I do this a lot, actually, as you can see from my example. And this will give you 120, and it will just optimize the splits for 120. Another thing you can do is this try set in here, and you're able to specify the specific numbers or the specific cycle lengths that you want to try to optimize to. So if you really were only interested in 60, 80, 90, you could go ahead and just type in 60, 80, 90 with the comma, and those are the only three cycle lengths that would be tested for optimization. And it's similar in network optimization as well, so it's kind of the same look and feel there. Yeah. The other question, is there an option in Vistro to choose rural versus urban settings for the initial value based on set flow? I'm confused. Maybe maybe this is talking about the CBD setting, or is this about a different setting? Bill, do you think this is the CBD?
There's a CBD factor. I think in the HCM there may be, I just never really worked in rural stuff. There may be a thing where it changes the default. I know in other chapters there are, and I should know the signals one about this. But the answer, if it is at all, there's a 1750 number, if I'm remembering correctly, instead of 1900. And so I don't know that we have that check. I'd first have to verify that actually is the case. Secondly, I don't know that we have that checkbox, but what we do have in Vistro is the, let me share my screen real quick, is the ability at any signal to modify in the saturation flow component. And we have global effects on these too. But back to the saturation flow, you can override your base saturation flow rate. And these come from, these are not just things that we like think, oh, people should just, do whatever. It's more about our customer base. And so we have various agencies throughout US and Canada that sometimes want to make various sat flow adjustments part of their requirements. Some of them make that as a requirement to the final number because they've done a bunch of studies in their area and say, hey, instead of going through all the calculations, we just want to apply this final sat flow rate. And so we have that ability to do down towards the bottom of this table, where you can hardwire in by overriding your calculated rate and putting in your actual, whatever that agency stipulation would be. That's also where you would do it based on field study. So if you did a sat flow field study rather than calculation, you check the box, and then from there you could put in whatever your actual number was, right? And that's per lane group. The other way that we have is these adjustments at the base level, and so that's where that one might come in, is an adjustment to the base saturation flow. Again, if that is the case, you can check that and then you can change that value accordingly. And then the rest of the flow.
I was going to say as well, if anyone's working out in the Bay Area in California, we do have the options in global settings to also enter some saturation flow rates. These would be the final saturation flow rates for like consistent analysis, and it's set up for various turn types. And this was also a request for agencies out in California to do it that way. And I think this 750s in that one actually.
Right. Yeah, and that's a perfect example of us meeting the needs of our agency customers in order for them to fulfill their objectives. So we're always open to hear what people need.
Okay. I'm trying to think if there's any questions I missed. So maybe if you have a burning question, you can type it in now and we might be able to sneak it in. I think we answered everything else I picked off the list before, so. There's a couple that just popped in. Ask and you shall receive. Let's see. I was wondering if there will be a Vistro training for students anytime soon. That is a good suggestion, and I can forward that to our product manager that's in academia. And I know in the past we've had like student editions of PTV Talks. So yeah, that I can pass that idea on and see if we can get something set up. Using the Vistro to Visum version or conversion method, so the A&M, will there be a CAV vehicle type created in Visum? So that was on my original request for this feature. We just didn't get to that yet, I believe, in the development. So that should be coming. I can't answer when, but that was our initial thinking, that we would eventually have the CAVs that you would put in that at the intersection also be a class that you could set up on the Vissim side automatically. So good question there. Thanks for the reminder to do that. Yep, this is a good question too. I'm working on a research project where I need to integrate Visum to Vistro, where the signal timings can be adjusted based on the simulation. We have seen multiple requests for this recently, and this is actually something I'm currently discussing with our Vissim team right now. So stay tuned for this. If you have an opportunity and you want to talk about this, just you can contact me directly, and I can hear kind of what your thoughts are on that. Is there a way I can get the LOS results printed to a report from the mitigation screen? So we're talking about mitigation here. We're not talking about scenarios, I believe. Bill, are you still sharing your screen, or
Yeah, I can show that. So if we any of our intersections, we have a workflow tab that's called mitigation over on the right. And there's a couple caveats here that I want to note. One is, first, to answer the question, when you're on the mitigation screen, it'll first start with an unmitigated result. This is the same exact result as what I would get from the traffic control table, and the same exact result that you would get if you did file and did your print reports from there. But you can do a quick report from here just by using these icons, right here, which is print this current option. Of course, the strength of the mitigation tool, that workflow, is to click the plus button, and at that point you get a copy. If you think of it like Excel worksheets or a spreadsheet worksheet that basically has created a new worksheet, now I can go in and I can mess around with testing different things out and getting different results, but it does not actually change my network results. So whatever I get in this screen, the only way to print the results is to do it from one of these icons at the top of this table. Either the print or print all the mitigations for this intersection at once. So that's how you would print from the mitigation screen. If I have an option like this, it will not show up under the file print report, but it will show up by printing within the mitigation tab.
Okay. There's one more. Is it possible to save the settings of save report in Vistro?
I'll let Adam answer
yeah.
that. The key is the base scenario. Set up your reports in the base scenario. So go all the way back to the base. I lied. I said I was going to let Adam answer this, but I'm talking through it. He can add to it.
I can read the next. I'll read the next question and get prepared.
When you go to the base scenario and you do file print report, if you set up your parameters here, right? So like what file you want, of course, and whatever that might be, test. And you can pick where you want your page numbers and where you want your report file name and where you want your company name and all that kind of good stuff. If you set all that up, and even which type of reports you want and stuff, do that under base. Base is this unique, has a lot of unique properties. If you do it under the base case, then that will become the default of your settings for these kind of things like headers and footers and all that stuff. And then you can always modify them as you go into each individual scenario to print.
Okay. One question started off with a lot of great comments on how Vistro is very useful and it is loved. So thank you for that. And then it got into the question. So the question was, what do you think is a good way to do DTA in Visum? Is it coming from the Vistro side, like we just showed today for the shortcut, or from the Visum side to Visum? What is the better approach? I think it may be, well, one, I mean, from what available data you might have, and two, probably what your study's objective is in the end. If you are interested in like a quite large modeling area and you're doing very detailed Visum types of things, I mean, now with the Vistro-like view in Visum anyway, you can get these geometries worked out pretty closely to what Vistro is doing. You could even start in Vistro and then import those changes into Visum if that's an easier process for you. But yeah, if it's a true like large DTA area study, I would stay probably on the Visum side and go into Visum for the corridor, just because the data's there. But if you're doing like your, you know, kind of what we were showing, kind of these smaller sections of cities, or you know, maybe you just want to preview something really quickly and get a quick simulation result into in Visum from Vistro. That's probably where it would be easier just to go from Vistro into Visum for DTA. The other thing I didn't really mention is like you can use DTA for these alternative intersections, and this goes back to the conversation of the facilities. You know, sometimes it's a lot of trouble to enter and balance traffic volumes between short intersections that you may have to place to make the geometry work for these alternative intersections that we were showing this year. And using this DTA method is a way to basically do that automatically, because you don't need to balance anything. It's DTA will figure out how to get through the intersections and saves you some time there. So yeah, really all of this just depends on the strategy, I would say. I know that's maybe not the best answer that you might want to hear, but that's probably the one we can give today. A couple requests, I guess. Is there a way to rearrange scenarios, and is there a way to renumber scenarios to have them in order? These are on our list, and this is definitely stuff we're looking into. The scenario list is in the order that it is created, and yeah, and then once you create the number, though, you can. Bill, are you going to show maybe how to do a renumbering?
Yeah, I can. Is it just through the rename? I mean, I don't know.
It's just rename.
Yeah.
Do rename and like wipe it clean, basically.
The whole thing, or just the number?
Or just take off the 5 and put like a 10 or something.
Yeah, it's still going to show 5 in front of it, though, right?
Yeah. So that's what happens right there. Is if you try to renumber that. So we're aware of this issue, and we're kind of talking about ways to do this, maybe with like an alias. So just on the front end, it looks like you can order them differently and have a different number, but on the back end, it still has the unique ID that it needs to do software stuff. But yeah, that's good feedback. I'll add it to the list. I know who you are now, and we'll see what we can do.
For sure.
Is it possible to print report for all scenarios together? That's also on the list. Yeah, it's currently one scenario at a time. Yes, I'm just thinking in my head because
It is, yeah.
Yeah, it's one scenario at a time, and mitigation is you have the possibility to print all the mitigations within that intersection. Yep, I want to make sure I got that clear. But definitely we'll have that on the list. It's already on the list. We'll add another name to this. Is there a way to renumber zones and gates? This is also, again, on the list, and something we're looking into, again, with maybe an alias option. So when you have the trip generation zones, right now, the 1, 2, 3 is like kind of grayed out, and you can't do anything with it. There'll be another field there, kind of like what we did for the intersections, like the signalized intersections. But there would be another field where you could change that value, but in the background, the number is still something consistent. Yeah. And then visually, it should be able to show the updated number. I agree. Yep. Okay, so I think Bill's demonstrating this right now, but I think that's pretty much all of the questions. If you have any other questions, feel free to email us and send your feedback and comments our way, and we'd be happy to answer them. I think we got through everything, but if we missed a question and we owe you an answer, we'll take this list and then provide the questions back in a few days, the answer to the question in a few days. All right, who wants to close this out?
I think we can both close this out. I think Jamie needed to step away for a minute, but yeah, thank you all very much for attending. If you've stayed on, extra kudos. Take your 1.5 PDH. We'll follow up with the standard email. You'll probably get a 1, but if you're in a self-reporting district like most people, I wouldn't see why you couldn't take 1.5. At any rate, yeah, generic email, marketing.us, or of course, you probably know the other emails. Any rate, and I would just say, stay tuned. We're a little bit behind schedule on creating our PTV Talks for 2022. We're going to brainstorm some of that when we're all together at TRB and come up with a good program. We try to avoid January anyway because of everything going on in the industry with TRB and so forth. But I would say that might be another thing I would throw out there, and you can send that to this marketing.us@ptvgroup.com. Would be if you have some ideas of things that you would like to see on PTV Talks. It could be over anything that we do at PTV, of course, not just Vistro. Secondly, if you are a practitioner user of our software and we'd like to do PTV Talks that also highlight your projects, we're definitely look to incorporate those types of presentations as well. So if you're one of the diehard 70 people who are still on this call at an hour and a half plus into it, we appreciate that. And you might just be the candidate that wants to participate in a future PTV Talk. Please feel free to send that to the marketing.us or bill.cisco@ptvgroup.com. Either one of those two would be good, and we'll take that under consideration as well. But otherwise, I think we're in good shape. Jamie, are you back with us? All right. I am just going to go ahead and say, Adam, do you want to say anything else?
Well, definitely, again, thank you for basically this year. I mean, it was a great year, a lot of good engagement, as I mentioned in the beginning of the talk today. And we definitely appreciate everything that you do for us. And again, just reach out and call us if you need some help talking to some agencies or getting Vistro deployed out into your area. That's what we're here to do.
All right, I'll go ahead and end the webinar. Thank you all, and we'll see you next time.